Hey YouTube world, this is T-Bone here, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about how I use comics to learn languages and have some fun. So let's take a look here. So the reason why I use comics is because, frankly, I'm not much of a fan of doing grammar tables and conjugations and declensions and all that other stuff that you typically see in a language learning class. I find it a little tedious, a little boring, and it keeps me away from the content of the language which I find the most interesting. Now, some of you might be saying, well, don't you need to study those things? And the answer is no, you don't, because naturally you'll pick up on the grammar of the language naturally, according to theories from Noam Chomsky, which is what I've been doing lately when using comics to learn a language. So, here's what I've been doing. So in the last week or so, I've read about 5 volumes of Dragon Ball. Now, Dragon Ball I've already read, and I'm already familiar with who the characters are in the story, so I have an idea of what's going on. So, the story itself I'm already familiar with, and I'm already interested in the story, and thought it would be a good way to give myself some comprehensible input. So here's my recommendations if you are going to use comics to learn a language. 1. Make sure it's content or something you want to read and you're actually interested. So that means you're going to have to look in your heart, your mind, whatever it is you do to motivate yourself, and think of a comic series you want to read. Now, for me, the first comic I chose was about a dog. I think it's called Poodle Gwa Hamke. Dog Kojung, something like that. It's for free to read on navercomics.com. I chose it because it was simple, it had a poodle, and I was interested in poodles. Then I chose Dragon Ball because, well, I'm interested in Dragon Ball, and I found issue 10 in Korean in my storage the other day when I was cleaning out the garage, and I thought, well, I'll just buy the whole set and I'll practice that. So, 1, something you're interested in. 2, when I'm reading this, I'll do a few things. Sometimes I'll stop and I'll draw a picture of the word or panel that is being discussed if there's something interesting within the language for me to slow down and process it. Now, this also means sometimes I'll slow down. Another way I slow down is when I'm reading. Sometimes I'll catch myself going too fast where I'm going over the meaning of the words or the sentences themselves, but I'm not actually comprehending it. Now, other times I want to shift and go fast and go over the words just to get a feel of how the words are. If, for example, if there's a big clump of words that I don't understand and I can't make sense of it through slowing down and through the pictures, I'll just go over the words without stopping and just kind of let it wash over me, so that way I can get a feel for what the words are, understand that they're going to exist in this context based on the picture being drawn by the artist, and going from there. Now, another thing I recommend doing is starting your story or comic from the very beginning. I jumped into Dragon Ball episode 10 and then went to 11, then 12, then 13, so I could say I've read all of Dragon Ball. But authors usually do a pretty good job introducing the characters in the first episode, first issue, and that makes catching on to who is who and what's being talked about a lot easier. So don't be like me and start with episode 10 of Dragon Ball or whatever comic you want to start with, but start from the very first issue, because the authors will introduce your characters in an elegant way, which helps you make sense much more quickly. Next, sometimes what I'll do is also I'll pretend like I have a piece of paper in my hand or a pen, and I will just write on my leg as a quick way to jot down a word and make note of it. This helps me to make sense and internalize a word I might not know. So, for example, the word in Dragon Ball that appears a lot is koma, so koma. And so that would mean like child or like a youngster, right? And so that appeared often. So what I wrote that down. The same thing with like kori, which would be tail, Goku's tail. And I do these things every now and again to make sense of the words, internalize them, so that way next time I saw the words, I was more familiar and more comfortable. So overall, it became a more enjoyable experience for reading. Now, if it becomes an unenjoyable experience for reading, say you think the comic is boring, the story's dragging on, something like that, you don't have to finish it, but you do have to find another comic that would interest you. So, for example, say that poodle comic I talked about earlier is not really tickling your fancy, but you find a comic on Naver about people raising rabbits or pigs, and you like that more instead. Then read that because that's what interests you, and at the end of the day, this is about being fun. Now, the reason why it should be fun is because for me, when it's fun, I'm motivated to keep doing it. I want to keep having more fun. I want to have more good times, which will make me more engaged with the language and learn even more of the target language, whether it's Korean, Japanese, Chinese, whatever it is. That is something that I try to make a point when I'm learning a language, so I keep going and have a great time. Anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you liked it. If you liked it, give it a like. If you disliked it, give your comments below. And if I'm forgetting any techniques that you do when reading comics, you can also leave them in the comments, and I might make a follow-up video if there's enough. Thanks, and have a nice day.